Real Enigmas and Theories is back again with another video. This is Reverend Kia Sharpton, and I want you to come on down to Costco and get you about $25 worth of that toilet paper down there. You know Lumon done bought Costco, so you gotta come on down here and support. Yo, I don't know about y'all, but it looks like Kier's about to drop a fire-ass gospel album or some shit. The single gonna be Lord Refine My Mind. They about to rewrite the history of Lumon and say that bro was out here selling shea butter skin salve. Welcome to Lumon, where even our white deity figures get a mandatory inclusive makeover. Introducing Kier 2.0, now with melanin and rhythm. Nah, all jokes aside, we're gonna talk about those paintings later though. But let's get more in depth with the esoteric breakdown as I promised before episode 4. So let's get into it. Severance season 2, episode 3 sent us in so many directions, but this esoteric breakdown, we're gonna be looking for some symbolism, a little bit of meta stuff, and some hidden meanings and whatnot. We'll see what else we find along the way. This episode was full of substance to pull from, so let's dig in. Don't forget to do all that dope YouTube stuff and be warned that there are spoilers if you're not caught up. So without further ado, let's cook. I want to mention a touchy subject with Milchick. And no, it's not the paintings. We're going to get to that. But I want to talk about the fact that Gretchen calls him Seth. We know that all of the Audis know Mr. Milchick. We talking about Mark, Dylan, Irv, and of course, Helena. They have all referred to him as Mr. Milchick with the exception of Natalie. She seems to know him pretty well, being that they're on a first name basis. They might even know each other on a deeper level. They might have talked about Lumon off the job or something, you know? That's just kind of what I picked up from their interaction. I don't know. However, we have also heard Cobell call him Seth, and I'm pretty sure they had a close working relationship being on the severed floor. Now, I did talk about this a little bit in my last video, but I just scratched the surface. Let's back up a little bit, right? Milchik snitches on Cobell and gets an instant promotion to manager. Then, right after that, MDR uprising happens as soon as Cobell leaves the building. Then, Milchik's put on damage control and told to handle the employees that were responsible. And he makes the wrong decision by firing Irv and Dylan, putting the whole Cold Harbor file in jeopardy. He then has to rehire them and convince Mark Scout to come back. And then he had to even sweeten the pot by giving him a raise of 20%. Keep that in mind. Then when Mark comes back, which I really think it was Devin who made Mark want to really come back because of Gemma and everything. Milchick fumbles the ball again by being outsmarted by Mark's innie and letting him get to that coveted speaker and speak to the board. So that's when Milchick had to go and rehire the team back and bring back the OG MDR team. This MDR team came back with a whole bunch of new rules that made the severed floor even more chaotic. You got employees running around with missing posters and department intermingling. Now Milchick is having to let the Audi's wife intermingle with any Dylan. And it's obvious that he's doing that to control Dylan, but still, I mean, these guys are getting whatever they want right about now. And on the day that he is scheduled to meet with his wife, Milchick is late to work. So he's showing up late to work on the same day that Gretchen was coming by, and he comes into work in an obvious hurry, right? Why was Milchick late? Maybe all of this was purposely done because he's secretly working to take Lumon down. That's very plausible. He could have been late due to meeting with Ragabi. Who knows? That would explain her having so much information. But I don't know, just something tells me that he was meeting with Gretchen. I could be wrong. Dylan's innie and Audi both call Seth Mr. Milchick. So why is his wife on a first name basis? The crazy part is Dylan's innie almost found out if Miss Wong wouldn't have had put the brakes on that by telling them to keep that kind of information separate. Shit, just let me stop beating around the bush. I'm gonna just go ahead and put it out there. Is Milchick smashing Dylan's wife, and is one or all of the children Milchick's? That would be interesting as hell. But follow me for a second. Gretchen is on a first name basis with Seth. He comes in late to work right before Dylan's wife was supposed to be there. She told him to tell Dylan it's her name. We don't know when she did that. When did she do that? He also told her that the meeting would be super weird. When did he do that? Milchick didn't go into Dylan's house anytime we saw other than when he woke Dylan up to find out where that card from OND was. However, we know that Gretchen wasn't there because she would have been watching the kids and he wouldn't have came in and interrupted that meeting, right? And we also know that she works at night, so it's most likely that she wasn't there. So this tells us that Milchick and Gretchen have had conversations off camera that we don't know about. I noticed that Dylan's children were playing with the stuffed Kier doll, but then I also spotted that duck toy on the table, and Milchick also has a duck near his desk. I thought that was interesting. And almost 2 weeks have gone by, and that pineapple's still sitting there. I kind of get the feeling that Dylan may know that his wife was messing around, and that's why we see his demeanor like it is while he's sitting on the couch. We even see him shedding a tear. So what was that about? He was probably sitting there like, man, fuck that pineapple. I don't want that shit. It comes from him. Also, the editor of the newspaper in the Lexington letters was named Jim Milchick. Now, Jim is also the name of one of Dylan's sons. I mean, look, Milchick is the one talking about thruples and shit. You know there's a bit of truth to every lie, right? It's just something to think about. So let's move on to some symbolism real quick. We have to talk about the mammalians. Right off the bat, when we see Lauren, the bell ringer, it kind of reminds me of Boyd ringing the bell in From. And when she comes over the hill, she immediately gives us the Baphomet as above, so below symbol. I mean, she does this right when she steps into the frame. We see her with the shears in one hand up and the other hand is down. In my very first Severance video called Severance Decoded, I broke down the Baphomet symbolism in this show and tied it to the numbers of macro data refinement. Macro means to view the larger, more broader aspects of a thing, and micro means more smaller details of a thing. It makes me kind of wonder if there's a micro data refinement team somewhere. But let's get deeper into this for a second. The Baphomet is depicted as a goat and has direct ties to math and sacred geometry. The pentagram, a 5-pointed star inscribed in the Baphomet's forehead, or it's also associated with the imagery of the Baphomet. The 5 elements represent earth, air, fire, water, and spirit. Those elements represent the 5 points of the human body and the pentagram, the head, the 2 arms, and the 2 legs. That symbolizes the connection between man and the divine. Now, as far as the show, it looks like those 5 symbols also represent the boxes that MDR refines these numbers into, which I believe are also tied to the 5 main types of brain waves that Ragabi spoke about: delta, theta, alpha, beta, gamma. Another mathematical aspect to the Baphomet is the goat's horns, which often form a spiral. This can be linked to the golden spiral, which is a manifestation of the Fibonacci numbers in nature. The Fibonacci sequence governs organic growth, mirroring the esoteric teachings about spiritual enlightenment and transformation. This is also connected to the pineapple and the pineal gland, because the pineapple is actually a Fibonacci fruit, and the pineal gland is located right where they put the chip inside the person's head that's being severed. Now, the Baphomet also represents duality, like male and female, dark and light, above and below, substance, oblivion, form, and chaos. You get the idea. Now, this is mathematically expressed as a binary opposition of ones and zeros, like computer logic, very much like the old school basic computers used on the severed floor. Now, goats are also used in many cultures for ritual sacrifice, from simple slaughters to elaborate rituals with altars, dancing, chanting, and blood anointment, many different things, from the simplest to the more elaborate. And it kind of reminds me of when Helly was asking if the numbers are bloody or are they chanting, when she was questioning about how could the numbers be scary. The goats are even encoded into the release date of the season 2 premiere, falling in the last days of the Capricorn zodiac, which is also a goat. This false year of 2025 is also the year of the snake in the Chinese zodiac, which is connected to the pineal gland and the Baphomet. The pineal gland is also referred to as the seat of the soul or the third eye, and it is said to reach its full spiritual enlightenment when one is to become one with their inner self by raising their kundalini energy. The kundalini is said to be a coiled snake at the base of the spine, and it'll work its way up the spine to the pineal gland for spiritual enlightenment. The caduceus in the staff of Hermes, deuces meaning two, the medical symbol of two snakes intertwined around a staff, it's often confused with the rod of Asclepius, but it depicts the kundalini energy rising through the spine, leading to the activation of higher consciousness. This would be the innie and outie self coming together as one, or one becoming one with their inner self. This symbol can also be seen in the belly of the Baphomet, along with the scales of the serpent. Now, January is also connected and named after a two-faced deity named Janus. I have broken this down in some of my From videos before, and if you haven't seen From, go check it out and then meet me back here for some of those breakdowns. But briefly put, January isn't the actual first month in nature's new year, and December isn't the 12th month in nature's new year. December is actually the 10th month, which is encoded into its name DEC, which means 10, like decade or decimal. This would make September the 7th month, and Sept means 10, just like Oct means 8, Nov means 9, and Dec means 10, right? So there are actually 13 months in nature. So that would make January, February, and March 11, 12, and 13. Now, with this being, our severed characters also have two faces in a sense. And in Roman mythology, Janus is the god of new beginnings, transitions, duality, time, and gateways. He is often depicted with two faces, one looking forward to the future and the other one looking back to the past. And this is what we see happening with our character Mark. Janus represents duality and the cyclical nature of time. He embodies the threshold between the past and the future, light and dark, death and life, very similar to the Baphomet and what the Baphomet represents. And this is also exactly the correct context for Mark's whole entire struggle. Janus was the key deity in initiation rites and secret teachings in ancient Rome. His two faces were a representation of the inner and outer knowledge. Every single character on this show is on a journey of inner and outer knowledge. Miss Casey telling our goat man about his outie and stargazing points me to look at how this can relate to sacred geometry and numerology with the show's release date and the references to the goat. I mean, it came right from the goat man's mouth, right? Pause. I've had a thought before that maybe most of the people in the town of Kier are probably severed. And shout out to my good friend Taryn Matheru for pointing something out to me. I had always thought that Rebecca was severed, but now with this new goat revelation and what Taryn pointed out to me, it makes everything way more intriguing. Think back to the season finale when Devin tells Mark that Rebecca keeps making a weird chewing sound and smells funny. That sounds like the behavior of a goat to me. And maybe that scar on her head is indeed from a severance procedure. Again, shout out to Taryn. That's a brother that's been joining me on many lives during my coverage of From, and I think we might be seeing him come through for some of my severance lives, so stay tuned for that. Now, one thing this show has been very big on is fertility from the beginning, and now it's doubled down on that concept with the addition of babies and baby bottles in the intro sequence. We had pregnant women, midwives, milk nurses, milking baby goats. Dylan even mentions remembering the birth of his son and a whole lot more birth and fertility references. Hell, just having goats alone, being that their very sexual nature is a reference to fertility itself. The egg references, the beehive references, honey in the baby bottles, Kier's head on a bee, even when Wagabi pushes Mark's head through a vesica Pisces during his reintegration procedure. That symbolizes rebirth of this new Mark, one with the inner and outer self as one. But still, with all of that, I think the goats and the eggs are the most esoteric fertility references. And in most cases, I know that the esoteric symbolism is tied to a major plot point in some cases. Some of it may even tie back to Keir's early days as a traveling snake oil salesman. He was out there selling his little shea butter skin salve. Now, how did Lumon start experimenting with goats, and where did the concept even come from in the first place? Is this something that Lumon added to its repertoire after Keir's death, or something he himself may have even learned or oversaw during his time as the CEO? Could there be a colleague that he knew that experimented on goats? I'm sure he had to know other snake oil salesmen in the industry. The late 1800s was full of these shady businessmen when Lumon Industries' wealth began to grow into what we see now. I brought up one before by the name of John Brinkley. He's known as the goat gland doctor, but he was one of the most infamous medical quacks in American history. He became famous and incredibly wealthy by promoting a fraudulent surgical procedure that involved implanting goat testicles into men as a cure for impotency and infertility. In other words, he was a fertility doctor. He also built a media empire, ran for political office, and pretty much revolutionized radio broadcasting. And he did it all while dodging regulators and lawsuits. John Brinkley and Keir Egan are both pioneers in controlling human biology, deception, and psychological manipulation. Brinkley, the fraudulent goat doctor, built an empire in Kansas, experimenting on desperate men with false promises of rejuvenation and a new life. He also used radio waves to brainwash the masses. Egan, meanwhile, was expanding Lumon Industries, a corporation fixated on reshaping human consciousness itself. With both of them operating in the same era, it's not hard to imagine Egan taking an interest in Brinkley's work, seeing it not as a failure, but as a blueprint for something even more powerful, like what we see today. The media control Brinkley wielded through his radio empire, convincing people to trust his fraudulent procedures, mirrors how Lumon controls information within its own walls, shaping the reality for its employees through rituals, selective exposure, and a corporate agenda. Brinkley's downfall in the 1930s left a vacuum. His fraudulent empire collapsed under the weight of government scrutiny, lawsuits, and exposure. But what if his research and his twisted medical theories, along with his psychological conditioning tactics, didn't just disappear, but were absorbed into something larger like Lumon? Lumon was probably already gaining traction in the industrial scientific circles, and then they stepped in where Brinkley left off at. They could have even had a hand in his dismantling. The goat-based experimentation, the use of media as a recruitment tool, the exploitation of vulnerable individuals through a promise of a new life, all eerily align with Lumon's later methods. Think about it. Brinkley was based in Kansas, and that is where the Lexington letters actually take place. And it was a radio broadcast that led Peggy Kincaid to Severance, and that might not be a coincidence. It could be a direct continuation of Brinkley's psychological influence strategy. They just rebranded that shit under the Lumon umbrella, the same way they have a Milchick at that newspaper company. Even more, both Brinkley and Egan understood the power of politics and using their influence to gain protection. Brinkley almost won the governorship of Kansas by using his radio empire to manipulate the public, just like we see Lumon's deep ties with lawmakers to protect its corporate secrecy. Brinkley manipulated the body, but Lumon manipulates the mind. His crude surgeries and false cures may have been at a dead end, but the core philosophy of hacking the human biology for profit and control was merely refined by Lumon. So we already know that the GOAT room isn't just some random department of Lumon, but it could be a relic of an older experiment. Brinkley's belief in enhancing human life with goats may have evolved into the Severance chip, the ultimate form of corporate augmentation. But it's not just about science, it's about control. Just like Brinkley used the radio to shape his own reality, Lumon's engineers self-contained world where Keir is worshipped as a god, and the truth is whatever the corporation says it is. In the end, Brinkley's failure may have been the foundation for something far more worse, something that Lumon actually perfected. buried, and then turned into an unstoppable machine, hidden behind bureaucracy, media control, and a carefully cultivated mythos. That would be crazy as hell, right? I'm not actually saying that that's what happened, but I just think that the connections are too interesting to be ignored. By the way, if you're liking the video, go ahead and do all that dope YouTube stuff by tapping the screen a few times for me. Thank you in advance. Now let's get to those paintings. The moment where Seth is presented with a series of paintings depicting him as Keir Egan is a masterclass in dark satire, both with the show's corporate dystopia, but also in its meta-commentary on real-world DEI policies. This scene isn't just about Milchick's personal experience. It's a direct critique of how corporations exploit racial representation as a cheap PR stunt rather than actually implementing meaningful change. On the surface, those out-of-touch paintings are meant to celebrate Milchick's recent accomplishment of snitching on Cobell and securing the bag for himself. But this gesture feels deeply insincere, awkward, and unsettling, even to Milchick himself. Instead of receiving a raise, more autonomy, or a seat at the actual real decision-making table, he's given a symbolic recognition that actually serves Lumon's interests more than his own. I mean, even Mark got a 20% raise. The company isn't honoring who Milchick is. It's forcing him into a role of a mystical white deity figure of Keir Egan. Milchick's identity isn't actually being celebrated. It's being co-opted and rewritten to serve as some sort of corporate propaganda inside the office. In my opinion, I think it's a parody of the way modern companies use DEI policies not to create any real opportunities for employees, but to pander a manufactured aesthetic of representation that protects their own interests. This type of shit directly mirrors real-world conversations about race swapping, white historical or fictional characters in media, especially in companies like Disney and Netflix and other studios that have adopted this surface-level diversity initiative. I mean, just look at how they drop these policies once they aren't cool anymore. And the companies lost shit tons of money by this disingenuous process anyway. Many corporations, especially in entertainment, have started race-swapping iconic characters, not to give genuine diversity, but as a lazy performative way to appear progressive without actually having to address any actual issues. You know, outrage is the new marketing, right? Let's just make the Little Mermaid black, everybody will get up in arms, and the movie will be a success. They don't really care about the representation. They just want to stoke the fires so that they can make some money. But Disney and a lot of other companies have realized that this is backfiring. Now, I think that the Milchick Keir painting is a direct mockery of this approach. Rather than creating new stories, new heroes, new positions of power, Lumon just simply repeats history to appear inclusive. I mean, think about it. They did a whole stop motion animation with a fake narrative about MDR, and then Milchick gets this whole fake Keir painting bullshit. Milchick's discomfort mirrors how most of the audiences react when they see these forced race swaps. It feels awkward, forced, untimely, and it fails to empower anybody. It kind of makes me wonder who all got these paintings. Natalie said she got a set of them too, but did the board actually tell her to lie about getting those paintings? Because that's not a sentiment that she just came and valued herself. They told her to say that shit. But the best part of this scene is how they introduced it. They snuck it in there when Milchick was running late, but it gets overshadowed by his anger towards Mark's balloons with Mark's face on them. And then Natalie says those balloons need some coffee. But then Milchick gets something with his face on, and it pretty much shows the ups and downs of that corporate ladder. And that brings me to my last thoughts. I wonder if Ragabi was experiencing those same ups and downs. Because like, what made her flip? And will this situation make Milchick flip? Or has he already flipped? Is he in league with Ragabi already? But the thing that would probably make Ragabi flip is, did they steal her Severance technology? I think Ragabi and Cobell are the two backstories that we definitely need. So we got a little bit of history, we got a little bit of esoteric symbolism, we have some theories, we got some tea and some speculation, and I had to just go ahead and talk about those paintings and my full thoughts on that as well. Anyway, just a little something to think about while we wait on the next episode. That's all for my video today. I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.